This podcast is brought to you by the Islamic Center and NYU. For more information, visit our website at www.icnyu.org.
Normally what we do in this halaqa is we go through some different texts, and I think for next week we'll start to explore some of that. There's a text by Imam Ghazali rahimahullah. It's called Ayyuhal Walad, Dear Beloved Child. It's essentially a set of kind of letters that he writes to a student that poses a bunch of different questions to him, and I think that's a text that I'd like for us to look at so we have a structure to this. But in relation to the film screening we had last week, how many of you were here when we watched Blood Brothers?
Oh yeah, to add to Soraya's point, it also reminded me of how our worship shouldn't just be limited to the masjid, that it should be carried with us wherever we go on this earth. And remembrance of Allah.
Over here too. There you go. Any other thoughts? There's not a right or a wrong here, right? There could be, but there's not. So you want to just let your thoughts kind of engage, right? What do these words mean to you? How do you think it connects to some of what we watched last week when we were watching Blood Brothers? If you were to make a connection. We were talking about these individuals who were giants, right? Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali, may Allah's mercy be upon both of them. You know, what are some of the connections that we see within the context of this hadith to that? If you could draw a parallel. Yeah, right? When Najmu wa shajaru yasjudan, the Quran says, even the stars and the trees, they prostrate. All this is amazing. You want to think about this as a broader sense. Most of our tradition is not limited to X set of words, only means Y thing, right? So a hadith doesn't only mean one thing, right? A verse of the Quran doesn't only mean one thing. Some of it does. Don't eat pork means don't eat pork. But the ability to extrapolate more meaning, to kind of ponder upon it, right? I just did a wedding for two of our alumni over the weekend. And in it, when I was giving the khutbah, I gave two examples of hadith that are used commonly for conversations on fiqh, right? So the Prophet ﷺ's wife, for example, talks about in the hadith how when he would leave from the home and he was on his way to pray in the masjid, he would kiss her before he left and wouldn't make wudu before he went to pray. And so the fiqh opinions on whether one has to make wudu after kissing someone or not, they say, well, no, this hadith, he kissed her. But it also talks about the Prophet kisses his wife. And that there's an element of kind of interaction there that's important to recognize that's kind of beyond what wudu is about. And he's talking about how he interacts with his spouse, right? And you can take more and more from it. When I read this hadith, in the context of the documentary we watched last week, what it tells me in relation to those amazing individuals, right? Muhammad Ali, Betty Shabazz, Malcolm X, their families, so many of these people, the whole world being a masjid, the whole world being a place you can pray, means that you can also be Muslim anywhere. And that anyone can also be Muslim, because if anyone can be Muslim anywhere, then everywhere has the capacity to have Muslims. And these were people who, regardless of where they were, right? Muhammad Ali is touring the world. Malcolm X is going to different countries. There are people who are in a boxing ring. They're incarcerated. They're in realities that go from space to space to space. But fundamentally, they're in a sphere of existence where, regardless of where they are, every place that they go is a place that they can be Muslim, because the entire world is a masjid. Does that make sense? Do you get kind of where the flow of logic goes? What do you think?
Sorry. I'll go. So Yeah, when
Ladies first, man. What are you doing?
it's fine, he's starting to go.
Come on. Go
Okay.
ahead.
So yeah, when Malcolm X was going around the world, he was telling the leaders of the world, "This is what's going on in America." So yeah, it's like he's creating community like how we have it in the masjid, but like expanding it on a global scale. He's doing acts of worship by bringing light acts of evil that are going on.
That wants it. It's not about it being connected just to prayer, right? This is a characteristic of our religion. Muslims pray. Whether you're Sunni, whether you're Shia, regardless of your race, your ethnicity, your class, it's a fundamental characteristic. You go to any middle school that does a module on Islam, they say that Muslims pray, right? So to think about it in terms of prayer, but it's also now saying that I can be Muslim wherever I'm at. You can be Muslim here at NYU, even if you are not from New York City. You can be Muslim here in New York, even if you're from a different part of the country. You can be Muslim in New York, even if you're from a different part of the world. Fundamentally now, if we extend that by a principle of logic, it's not saying though that it's going to be easy. It's not saying that everything is just going to work to kind of meet your needs. Because the two people whose film we watched last week, or the documentary was focused on, they went through real challenges. They went through real difficulty. And the notion was that there was a fluidity to their movements. So much of our tradition is about this. I wish I had a whiteboard, but I don't. I could type on this thing, but I don't want to turn those on again. When we look at words in our religion, the word Sharia, what does it mean? What does it mean? What does it literally mean? So technically, Sharia refers to Islamic law, the civil and criminal aspects of it. What's its literal definition? Yeah, it's a path to water, right? The word sira also is a pathway. Spiritual paths in our tradition are called tariqas. They're movement that's there, right? Everything is about kind of movement and going. You're not just stuck. And it gets deepened with hadith that say things like, kun fi dunya ka'annaka gharib aw abr as-sabil, that be in the world as if you are a stranger or a traveler. And if the entire space is a place that you can be Muslim, in some spaces you're going to be Muslim and it's going to be amazing. And in some places you're going to be Muslim and you're going to be from amongst those who are outcasted. There's going to be opportunity in scenarios that are both, but the first step is in recognizing that there shouldn't be a space that you go into where you have to leave your Islam at the door. There's not a place that you need to go. And that's not now just fundamentally within Muslim versus non-Muslim spaces, but also Muslim and Muslim spaces. Because if now there's this universality that says, I can be Muslim anywhere, and everywhere is a space where Muslims can be, it's going to also look a little different from place to place. Even if you just look at yourselves here, all of you are not from the same place, right? Are all of you from the same place? No. So to be now in a space where you can be an outsider that is dealing with external elements that are seeking to kind of push you here and there. But when you are within a communal experience and still feel, where do I belong in this? So Malcolm X is in a space where he found a space to belong, but then also that space suddenly was a place that didn't want him to be a part of it. And his ability to remain true to a sense of self necessitated being malleable so that he had fluctuation to his ideals, his beliefs, his values. But he was also willing to recognize in his own growth that sometimes you have to be able to move away in order to be able to really harness what it is that you're seeking. You all have been here for a few weeks now. And for some of you, it's been amazing. For some of you, it's been hard. For some, you've had ups and downs in different places. But in recognizing how to be in spaces that are the secular, as we were talking about, where it's hard to find God, where people can't see you past your black and brown skin, where they look at how you dress or how you do not dress, and which way do you pray and you do not pray, and all of these different variables. In recognizing that I am able to be Muslim anywhere, I also then have the ability to recognize that that means anyone else is also entitled to be Muslim anywhere. And it might be a little bit different than what I look like or how it is that I might understand it to be. Why is this an important conversation? We have so many individuals who are luminaries of our tradition, that their starting point in this worldly existence is not where their ending point is, meaning that they move, they are migrants, they are refugees, they are pushed from their homes. Ismail alayhi salam, whose narrative with Hajar, peace be upon her, is something that I think demonstrates this quite deeply, especially in the notion of this idea of being a path to water, the Sharia, because they're the ones that start Zamzam. They go to a place where there's nothing, but also within a broader sense of things, they're not necessarily recognized as the individuals who have kind of what everybody's looking for. Hajar, peace be upon her, elderly black woman. Ismail, he's the wrong son. He's not within the lineage that people recognize that there should be an embracement of. And so you have these two people now who are essentially otherized, both in the immediate as well as generationally thereafter. And they move in a direction where they're just in a place where there's nothing. But within our tradition, where you can be any space, and you can be Muslim wherever you're at, there's dynamics that shift there. And you see now an elevation that's coming from this idea. Does Ismail alayhi salam go back to where it was that the Prophet Ibrahim brought him from in the first place? No, he doesn't. He stays situated there. The Zamzam comes at his blessed feet when the angel comes to strike it. Hajar, peace be upon her, who nobody wants to have anything to do with, right? The angel is coming to her. That's how amazing of a person she is. And when Zamzam goes everywhere, she seeks to contain it. The Prophet ﷺ has hadith that says, may Allah's mercy be upon Hajar, had she not sought to contain the Zamzam, it would have just flown all over the earth's surface. Where the water comes, the birds start to flock to the middle of the desert. And there's a tribe called the Jurhum tribe that they're wondering, why are these animals going where there's nothing? And so they send some of their own emissaries. And they're there present now. To their astonishment, there's a large body of water, this elderly woman and her infant baby. And then they all come and they engage her in conversation. Can we settle here? And she says, yes, but the water is under my possession. And where they begin to situate themselves around Zamzam, the generations build, and this is where Mecca is formulated from. But the water attracts life to it, right? Sharia is meant to be invigorating, not restrictive. It's meant to be expansive. It's supposed to be a source of life to give you strength and empowerment. But also for what we're talking about, they left familiarity to go to unfamiliarity. And there's so many dynamics that over the course of however much time we spend together this semester, we can try to understand what's going on here, that this tribe of men is bartering and bargaining with this woman. They are of a different culture. She's older than them. She's a different skin color than them. And she's a different gender than them. But their understandings of racial and gender dynamics is such that they're still engaging her in this, and they yield to her authority. Those shifts come from someplace. And I'd say a part of where the shift comes from a forgetting of the fact that hadith like this are not just about prayer, but it's about also the universality of this tradition. That I can be Muslim anywhere, but also then anyone should be able to be Muslim. And the commonality that threads us together is not rooted in externals alone, but a recognition of where shared internals come into play. Where are spaces that you feel like it's hard to be Muslim? And I want you to not speak to me about this now, but again, you just turn to the people around you. If we could try to do it in like groups of 2 or 3, there's a little bit more people now, so that everyone's kind of talking and we're hearing, right? If I can be Muslim anywhere, as per this hadith, what makes it difficult? What makes it more of a challenge? Are there places that I feel like I just have to leave it aside? Do you get the question? Right? And how do we start to navigate some of that together? And how we said last week, you remember, I said, if you don't know what you believe, you're not going to be able to act upon your belief. In the space that you're in now, religion has to not transcend ritual. Ritual is a critical part of it. These are spiritual vehicles that are time-tested and God-given to help enhance our own inward stability in pursuit of real contentment, right? And may Allah make us from amongst those who feel real contentment. But the recognition of it about getting deeper now, right? We saw a documentary where people were going through a journey, a process. And part of it was a struggle to say, what do I really believe in? Where are my convictions? And some of it then was executed in a way that if you asked them at a later point in their life, they'd say, I probably shouldn't have been doing what I was doing, right? And not just in terms of behaviors or things to that extent. Muhammad Ali tells Malcolm X's kids, I regret not kind of being close to your father, at the end of life. There's opportunity to grow through all success as well as mistakes, but fundamentally, the trajectory is about knowing how to engage what's going on within you as it is that you're dealing simultaneously with what's happening outside of you. So when Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiallahu anh leaves from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he sends him away, he tells him, have consciousness of God wherever you are, right? Haythu ma kunt. The sense of what you bring to all of your spaces has to be inward out, not outward in, or even simply just outward. You are not just the externals, you are what it is that you're bringing inwardly to things. And where you're at now, you want to start to think about deeply, what do I believe in? What are my convictions? What are my ideals? How does that synergize with my religious identity? So that when I'm sitting at a table and I'm trying to decide, do I get up to pray Dhuhr or Asr? Or do I just sit down? It's not about the rituals and ends, but a means to something. I fundamentally understand a little bit differently. What is this thing of prayer about anyway? What is it that it's bringing me to? 99% of people, if you ask them for a place to pray, it might give you a little pushback or whatever else. There's ways to get it. Most people have the difficulty in even being able to ask for it in the first place. And we don't live in a vacuum. And so where and how the control mechanisms come in around validation, around self-esteem, around sources of approval in terms of what am I allowed to be doing, so to speak? Why do you need someone's permission to be you? Where does it come from? And I wouldn't say that it's just any one spot, but there's complexity to it. The way religion gets introduced to us can be a catalyst for not knowing then how to be when we are not in the spaces where everyone is just like us. So if I'm in a space where somebody told me, here's how you read the Arabic of the Quran, here's how you pray, this is how you make wudu, I go to the masjid and everyone's there and they're just like me, that's fine. Now when I'm out in a world where nobody else is like that, everybody's different, and people are in a space where they don't see it the way I see it. And I've been socialized also to be able to think about me being the stranger that the Prophet ﷺ talks about is something that's a negative, not a positive, right? Because what does our tradition really call you to, right? If it's strange to visit the sick in the hospital, be strange. If it's strange to take in orphans or be kind to your elders, if it's strange to greet those that you know and greet those that you don't know, to be a person of compassion and mercy and consciousness, then be strange. But something builds up inwardly. And we want to have aspirational examples like those that we watched in this documentary, but to still make it tangible and to see where and how I can move forward. If the entire place is a masjid, the earth and everything in it, that means that I don't have to be in a place where I mute parts of myself. But what's getting in the way? And it's important because the people you sit with right now, they're going through a lot of the same things you go through. And where and how you can create a mechanism that allows for you to lean on one another and support one another and to engage. So if anyone can be Muslim anywhere, if they choose to, you gotta also think, well, what makes somebody Muslim? And there's really not so much to it. What makes somebody Muslim? It's not a trick question. Huh? Yeah, if somebody walked in here and they say, I want to convert to Islam, what do? Okay, anything else? No, that's it. It's a universal religion that puts God at the center. That doesn't say you got to be from any place or any part of the world or certain social class, whatever. If it was more complicated than that, then it would pose undue hardship on somebody. It's not something that would recognize diversity. Because we're so different, it's pretty easy to do most of the things that all of us are either entitled to have access to or required to do. The embracing of that now is in this place, right? Ismail alayhi salam, Hajar, peace be upon her, our narrative is very different. There's individuals who have these figures in their religious traditions and distance themselves. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he's got two companions, Abu Dhar radiallahu an and Bilal radiallahu an. They're arguing with each other, emotions escalate, and as they get risen up, Abu Dhar radiallahu an calls Bilal radiallahu an the son of a black woman in a derogatory way. And Abu Dhar himself is black. And he's a black Arab. So he's essentially calling Bilal African. And when they both hear what he has said, they get quiet. And Abu Dhar is trying to get Bilal to kind of engage him in a way to, remedy what he did. And when your Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam hears this, he gets angry, right? The Prophet doesn't get angry at most haram things. Ya Rasulullah, I drank, this. Ya Rasulullah, I kissed this person. I committed zina. He's walking with people through their struggles. If the Prophet sees somebody abusing somebody, he sees somebody being racist, he gets angry. No ifs, ands, or buts. And when he sees this happen, he gets awareness of it. In that response, he says to them that all of us are the children of a black woman, referring to Hajar, peace be upon her. That's what our tradition sees her as. When they are now with the Jurham, they're not like them. They're different. They have to be able to maintain a space as people who are migrants into a new culture that are still able to exist in a way where they now can live with the balance that they have. And so theologically, to be Muslim, there are principles. But fundamentally, you want to know that La ilaha illallah means that you are all brothers and sisters to each other, regardless of the backgrounds that you're coming from. The Prophet, he has a companion by the name of Usama ibn Zayd, radiallahu anhuma. Usama ibn Zayd, he's the son of a man by the name of Zayd ibn Haritha. Zayd ibn Haritha is so close to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that on one occasion, he's actually known as Zayd ibn Muhammad. And when verses are revealed that say you cannot assume the natal identity of someone, meaning that a person is always the child of their parents, right? There's people who would usurp the land of the orphans. There's people today who build orphanages and they're corrupt and they just take money. So to circumvent corruption and somebody saying, that's now my kid, and you take their inheritance, our tradition says, no, that's not your kid. And that kid's inheritance is their own. Does it make sense? And so Zayd ibn Muhammad goes back to being Zayd ibn Haritha, but they're still very close. Ayman Baraka is Osama bin Zayd's mother. She's arguably the only companion of the messenger who's with him from the time he's born until the time he passes away. That when she was 16 years of age, she was taken as a servant in the household of Abdullah, the Prophet ﷺ's father. She's one of the women who nursed the Messenger of God ﷺ. And so in his infant socialization, he's building a relationship with this woman who, when he passes away, companions who are senior would come to her to say, tell us about Muhammad. She was also somebody who came from Abyssinia, meaning that she herself was black. The Prophet had a deep connection to her. Osama bin Zayd, there's narrations where the Prophet would put him on one knee and put his own grandson on his other knee. He would make dua to Allah that, Ya Allah, love them as I love them. There's no doubt he loves this man. When Osama bin Zayd is older, at a very young age comparative to what we understand, but in his late teens, he is now given senior rank within the army, military, etc. And they find themselves in the battlefield. And Osama bin Zayd, he is in the battlefield, and there's somebody who he is fighting with from Medina, the Ansar, and they're taking someone on from the opposition. This person is causing a lot of detriment. Osama bin Zayd raises his sword, and he's about to deliver a fatal blow, and that guy says, La ilaha illallah. And now he has seconds to decide what to do. And he decides to take his life. The Prophet ﷺ, he's engaged now by the Medinese man, the Ansari man, the man from Medina. And he says, Ya Rasulullah, we were in the battlefield. This man, Osama ibn Zayd, was about to take his life. He said the Shahada, and then he still killed him. Is that what we're supposed to do? He's not telling on Osama, but when you need a fatwa, you're going to go to the Prophet. So he's trying to understand what happens in this circumstance. Because a lot of this is just in real time, right? This happened, what do we do? That happened, what do we do? And so the Prophet ﷺ, he says to Osama ibn Zayd, Lima qataltahu, then why did you kill him? He says, Ya Rasulullah, innama kana muta'awwidha, that he was just seeking protection, right? Like, you know how we say, A'udhu billah, when we're doing the ta'awwudh, that's what he was saying. He was seeking protection. And he says to him again, why did you kill him? He said, Ya Rasulullah, he was just scared to die. He said, oh, Osama, did you open up his chest and look into his heart to see that this is the reason as to why he said what he said? And then he keeps asking him. أقتلته بعدما قال لا إله إلا الله أقتلته بعدما قال لا إله إلا الله, that did you kill him after he said La ilaha illallah? Usama bin Zayd, he says, I wish I became Muslim after that day so that I wouldn't have disappointed the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the way that I did. These are people in a battlefield. The Prophet's saying, you gotta honor this man's shahada. You have a unique opportunity being in a space where there's going to be some bumps here and there, because you all come from your own spheres of existence, but you also have unique opportunity because most masjids, they don't look like this. They don't have to figure out how to work it out. Black, brown, white, Sunni, Shia, Salafi, Sufi. People of different classes, people of different nationalities, people with different residency statuses. But if you fundamentally are not able to reflect on what this really means as a connector point, it's not going to make a difference that we have hundreds of people that show up to different things and there's whatever else going on here, because you're not going to come together in a deep way. You see what I mean? And then be able to do what you uniquely are poised to do because you have that connection. Usama bin Zayd, he's in a battlefield again. And this time, somebody from the opposition, they're causing a lot of problems. He sneaks up behind him, raises his sword, about to take that person's life, and that guy says the Shahada. And somebody goes to the Prophet, Ya Rasulullah, rejoice, Osama took care of that guy that was causing us a lot of problems. The Prophet says, tell me how it happened. And he said, I came up behind him, I raised my sword, he said the Shahada, and then I took his life. He says, why did you kill him? And instantaneously, Osama bin Zayd, he knows. And he says, Astaghfirli ya Rasulullah, seek forgiveness on my behalf. He says, Ya Osama, kayfa tasma'una billah ilaha illallah fa idha ja'at bil yawm al-qiyamah, that what are you going to do when he comes carrying that la ilaha illallah against you on the day of judgment? Astaghfirli ya Rasulullah, seek forgiveness on my behalf, O Messenger of God. He says, what are you going to do when he comes carrying that la ilaha illallah against you on the day of judgment? You want to get to the depth within yourself, in a society that's hard to find God, of really believing who God is to you. And you believe in a God that is a God of everything, that creates a sphere of influence that allows for interdependence to be what it is that brings you together. So that there's not hollowness to standing side by side in prayer because you don't even know the name of the person that you're standing in prayer next to. The number of us who are sitting here right now, just really think, in the course of however much time you have left, who are people, if you look around the circle, that you likely are not going to ever sit down and share a meal with? Who are people that you might not ever invite to spend time with you? And what is that based off of? And is that what this hadith is telling us? As you said it beautifully, if the entire world is a masjid, that means that I should be able to find my sisters and brothers anywhere. Islam in China might look Chinese. Islam in Malaysia might look Malaysian. Islam in Sudan might look Sudanese. Islam in any part of the world is meant to be reflective of the paradigm in which culturally it's situated in. I've gone for Hajj, I've gone for Umrah. May Allah bless us to visit his house in Makkah al-Mukarramah again, and the illuminated city of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And may he end the oppression that comes out of those countries. There's times I've sat down next to people who are from different parts of the world. We don't share any language in common, and we still have the best conversations today. Because the connection is from here, not from anywhere else. That's not going to come from being in a space of distance, but also not recognizing the role the self plays here. And so there's one last hadith that I want us to talk about that is a foundational hadith in our tradition. That says, you will not enter paradise until you believe. This is a construct in many hadith narrations. And this one says, you will not enter paradise until you believe, that you will not believe until you love for each other what you love for yourselves, right? Many of you have probably heard this hadith. The word hub in Arabic is derived from the same root as the word for seed, habba. And so the way Arabic functions, as many of you might know, is that etymologically words have root letters. And words that have the same root letters, they have a common meaning. So Muslim, Islam, Salam, they all have the root salama. You can see the commonality there. Words that have the same letters but in a different order, they also have a relationship. So ilm, ayn lam mim, has the same root as amal, ayn mim lam. The letters are the same, but they're in a different order. And you can see the relationship between ilm as knowledge and amal as action. And then if some of the letters are the same, but one is different, there's also opinions that say that there's a relationship there, right? Like you have the word nafasa, which means to breathe, right? And then you have nafatha, which like we say in Surah Al-Falaq, nafathati fil uqad, right? It's to blow. You know, you can keep kind of changing words in that way. So the root of love, hub, is the same as the word for seed, habba. Why? Why do you think that is? Why is there a commonality there? You're not going to build love for somebody if you're not spending time with them, right? You can't just kind of have, if I took a handful of seeds and I threw it in Washington Square Park and I just left it on its own, is it going to do anything? No. It needs care. It needs literal cultivation. This hadith is making it conditional upon your faith. It's saying your faith is not complete until you have that love. And it's something that you got to reflect upon. If you don't know what love is and you've never talked about it, it's not a bad thing. Don't think about things as good and bad and right and wrong only, but to understand that then there's starting points. You know, I was in Houston and I had just come back from Myanmar, where I was with Rohingya refugees. They're facing ethnic cleansing and genocide. And Allah made things easy for them. And I'm talking about this hadith on the minbar, and an older man comes up to me afterwards and basically said to me that, like, nobody has ever told me that we're supposed to love people. He's probably 60 some years old. He's gone to Jummah for decades. He said, you're the first person I've ever heard say to me that it's important for us to have love for others. How is that possible? If he went to Jummah every year for like 5 decades, 30 minutes a week, 26 hours a year, that's a crazy amount of times to be hearing stuff. How do you not hear that? So you start to think about that. One of the key parts to this hadith, though, that kind of gets glossed over often is that it's also telling you that you need to have a love for yourself. Because you're loving for others what you love for yourself, which means that self-love is a part of our tradition. It's hard to have self-love when you feel like you can't be yourself in certain spaces. And you don't see that the entire world is a masjid. that I have to leave a part of myself in order to be in this classroom or in this office space or to sit with these people or to be with those people. And then the strength and conviction that comes from some of this gets kind of left behind also. It's not a question you got to ask yourself out loud with all of us, but in your own reflection. Do you love the you that you are? So that when you're going into that room and you're saying to the professor or the supervisor or the employer or whoever, I need to be able to pray. I'm going to be sticking my foot in that sink. You don't have to chase after other spaces to get validation because the love is coming from inside. You know that there's nothing wrong with you. That's what these people did. Muhammad Ali did not love himself through arrogance. You heard his words, right? You know, I just shook up the world. But he knew himself to the space where he knew also what his self-talk had to be. What do you think it's like for this man who won the Olympics and came back and they still wouldn't let him eat in a restaurant with white people? He's got to have a self-talk that enables him to keep going and get through these days. Loving for others what you love for yourself also means that it's okay to love yourself. You want to frequent gatherings like this so that you can start to build a support system that's rooted now on something that transcends socially constructed differences, that la ilaha illallah, but also is based off of these types of values: love, compassion, mercy, beauty, integrity, honesty. So it's all not just about worldly success and wealth and things to that extent. You get what I'm saying? Okay. I'd love to hear just a couple of people's thoughts on the conversation on a whole, where it's leaving you, just so I know where we're at. Because I've known some of you for some time, and some of you, I don't even know your names, and I'm sorry. My name's Khalid, by the way, and I'm looking forward to getting to know everybody as much as I can. But I want to make sure that I have a pulse on where we're kind of at right now as we're wrapping up. And firstly, may Allah make us all those who find real peace and real love. And may He make us from amongst those who give real peace and real love. May Allah make all of you those who are never in a place where you feel unloved. It's one of the worst feelings in the world. It's a very real feeling. It's hard when religion also now becomes weaponized and doesn't allow for conversations to happen where you can make yourself vulnerable. And I said this kind of at the end of Jummah last Friday, but I'm here to talk to any of you and to listen whenever you feel like you need a space to explore some of these conversations, as much as the rest of our staff is, and you let us know what we can do. I think there's a lot that goes into what you're saying right now, and I think it requires us to have a working definition of what love actually is. The Prophet ﷺ, he had a deep love for his people. He was also a person who's deeply pursuant of justice, right? His du'as for his people were there, the ones who oppressed him. Allahumma gfir li qawmi fa innahum la ya'lamun. That, oh Allah, bestow your maghfirah on my qawm, because indeed they don't understand. He's making du'as like this, not just in the depths of the night in his house, but he's standing at Uhud with his blessed face pierced by the opposition, and blood is dripping out of his injured mouth, and he's jumping to catch the blood in his hands. And the people are saying, why are you doing this? And he points to those who have hurt him and says that those people would not be able to handle what would happen to them if this blood hit that dirt. Right? Because it's not just the people who love the Prophet. Imagine, there's hadith that say when the Prophet would walk in the deserts of Arabia and Meccan society, a cloud would be walking over, going with him, right? This entire creation had a role with Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he still didn't get a big head as a result of it. He still had humility. That love doesn't mean that he wasn't in pursuit of social cohesion and equity. And sometimes our inability to reconcile how the two go hand in hand is because there's limitations put on where our religious identity has to start and stop. And we don't kind of get engaged in a framework of religion that's about social reform and social justice. To me, good religion is about taking on societal elements. And if your practice of religion is not bringing you to do that, you have to ask yourself deeply, well, what's the point of your religion? You can still have love for the person that's at the other end of it. The other part to this, and maybe we can have another conversation just on this, like in Arabic, there's about a dozen different ways to say love. So there's nuance that goes into it. Mahabba is the most generic form of love. It's like a broader categorization of it. But there's so many other phases of love that your heart can go through that allow for you to have different elements to it, right? I didn't know what love really meant until I had my daughter. My daughter, Medina, some of you have met Medina. Who here has met Medina? Yeah, she was a lot of fun, right? A lot of life, a lot of light. And my wife, Priya, and I, when Medina was born, my world was turned upside down. We were leaving the hospital and some guy was smoking like far away from the door. I still remember. He just turned 9 this year. And I gave this man like the ugliest stare because he was smoking, because I didn't want that smoke to get into my daughter's lungs. And he looked at me and he was like, I'm so sorry, and put the cigarette out. And just holding her and being with her and experiencing, like watching her being birthed into this world. I had never felt love for somebody like that ever in my life. When my son was going to come to the world, my wife was pregnant with him, and I said, I don't think I'm gonna like this kid so much. And Priya was like, what are you saying? But I couldn't fathom how I could love somebody as much as I love Medina. And so I wasn't saying, I was just being honest with my wife. And then when Kareem was born, not only did I have such a deep love for him, but if anything, it made the love I have for my daughter that much stronger. And more importantly, the love that I have for their amazing mother was just made that much more solidified and concrete. My life experiences, though, couldn't get to a place where I was reflecting on these things if I didn't have room to reflect on it. Everything is not going to always be just at any moment of time. You cannot have this conversation sitting in the middle of your econ class or bio class and say to the professor, let's just put this on a pause. I really want to know, what does love mean? But your hearts are precious enough that you have to make time to be in spaces like this so you can hear what other people are experiencing that you know you're going through also. You just don't know how to articulate it. And then we can come together to create baseline definitions that we can grow upon. One of the ways you can know something is, principally, is by identifying what it's not. So love is not something that should ever abuse you or harm you. It's not. Love is not oppressive. Love is not something that is rooted in any system of inequity or imbalance. Can we agree with that? And as we start to define more what it's not, we start to come looking to it more about what it is and what it looks like in a healthy form, and how we bring that now as a motivation to whatever it is that we're going on and what we're doing. Do you see what I mean? You don't want to confine yourself also to places where you can't be human. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to do things to hurt people. People are going to do things to hurt you. And it's not that it's about, let me turn the cheek, so to speak, but to utilize it as a process of self-awareness and self-recognition, so that if I am here today and I want to be there tomorrow, I know a route to get to what my goal is by understanding not just simply what the destination is, but where I'm in fact standing in relation to it. And the wisdom that comes from our tradition of being able to say, I don't know something, is empowering. One, because you don't have to know the answer to everything. And two, when you can say what you don't know, you can then figure out how to actually start to know it and harness it. You see what I mean? You don't have to like everybody that is out there. You don't. You don't even have to get along with everybody, right? I personally, I don't care if all of you are friends, right? I would love to be friends with all of you, but it's not about that every single person now suddenly has to have deep affinity for everybody. That's not what love is. To understand that there's elements of respect, there's elements of courtesy, there's elements of adab that go to it. Civility, good etiquette, a recognition of where and how the things you enjoy, you would want that for other people. You see what I mean? And when your heart does not coincide with certain things, that's what the hadith is telling us. You should not like things that are oppressive. You should not like things that create inequity. You should also want to get to a point where you recognize that some of what it is that you're afforded as privilege comes at the cost of somebody else not being able to have those things. And that real love is about a willingness to give up so that those processes can be dismantled, even if that means you lose a little bit of the benefit and privilege you're afforded. You don't want anybody else to have to go through real hell so that you can have gain. The hadith says that you will not enter paradise until you believe, and you will not believe until you love for each other what you love for yourselves. Right? It literally says until you love for your brother what you love for yourself. But grammatically, the language is like a gendered language. So the masculine doesn't denote maleness. And Imam Nawawi, rahimahullah, he says that the word brother in this hadith is not in reference to your brother in faith, but your brother in humanity, right? So it's just a love for people. There's different forms of love. So everything's not just romantic love, right? Or physical love, or erotic love, or these kinds of love. It's just a universal love that people can have. The Prophet is saying that of the variables to your faith being sound, you need to be able to love one another, right? Allah Azza wa Jal, there is a hadith, and we'll talk about this more, and I'm going to get back to what we just said. There's a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ, he says, تُخَلِّقُ بِأَخْلَاقِ اللَّهِ, that, embody the characteristics of the divine. Because the idea is that God is good, and so if you want to be good, then embody the divine names of God that you know. So God is merciful, and God is good, so being merciful is good. Right? So one of God's attributes is that he's the source of love, al-wadud. And God's love for us is not because of who we are, but God's love for us is because of who he is, Azza wa Jal. So when you're defining in your own terms your sense of self, your love for someone else is based off of where you're coming from. Does that make sense? Right? In terms of like getting to these places, I think we'll wrap up here because I want to be mindful of everyone's time. Reflection is really important. Places to go through assessments of things. And instead of maybe Dear Beloved Son, another book we can look at is called Book of Assistance that I think helps in this kind of frame. It creates structure to saying, how do I get from point 1 to point 2 without it just being something that I figure out on my own. Because it's not that there's complexity in the sense that it's not simple, but there's elements that we want to think about, right? If your goal is something that's going to be really arduous, then part of that process is going to be, how do you know how to rest? How do you know how to breathe? What are your self-care strategies so you have outlets to be able to engage in to replenish your energy after you've utilized it? right? If you study for an exam or write a paper and put an all-nighter in, the next day you're not jumping up and down to say, let me now just go about my routine. Your body is going to tell you it needs sleep. You are physically exhausted. When you are emotionally, mentally, spiritually drained, what do? And it's not to just have that as an open-ended question, but to be able to answer it with subjectiveness for yourself. Who are the people you associate with, the spaces that you frequent? And this is all derived from our tradition. You're going to spend time in the market, then you spend time in the masjid, not because you're a good Muslim or bad Muslim or this and that. There's people I know who are amazing Muslims that they, when we are open fully, come and catch the last rak'ah of Jum'ah as a minimum because they can't leave their street carts for more than 5 minutes. It's not for us to judge them or to say that because I have the luxury. I work down the hall from the prayer room. It's not hard for me to walk down here to pray. It's not the same thing comparatively. You don't want to see these things as constructs of assessment that elevate the self by denigrating somebody else. That guy has probably much more in terms of what his inward is bringing, right? And may Allah enable us to be from amongst those that are sincere. And so the how-tos also have specifics. And this is what I'm going to say again. We're here to talk to you and build strategy with you individually. It's easy to find information. That's not hard. You can Google anything you want and you'll get it. You have access to more concrete information than anybody has for centuries. The ability to now trickle it down, though, necessitates recognizing that the most precious parts of you are individualized. Your heart is not in somebody else's being, as much as your spirit, your soul is not encompassed within somebody else's body. You will have specific strengths and non-strengths that are not meant to make you isolated or alone, but if you don't have a sense of self more broadly, holistically, then you're going to be the person who turns to YouTube and types in, let me hear this lecture on this topic. And whatever that guy is saying from miles away in the talk that was given years ago to an audience that you weren't sitting in, you're going to try to mesh it into your life and it's going to be frustrating. Your hearts are more precious than that. And you have access to multiple individuals who are not just religious people, but I'm saying there's a lot of people that you can sit with in general, and it can be more one-on-one and focused. But if we were to look for general things, I'd say what are some of the things you need as you're trying to increase and grow? In terms of tangibles, make sure you spend time with good people who are going to help to make your heart feel soft when things get tough and it's tiring. 2, your physical wellness is deeply intertwined with the rest of your wellness. Spiritual, mental, emotional. 3, find some spaces to self-express because the world can be really heavy. And if you always have to be on point all the time, you don't have spaces to just go and word vomit and just let it all out so that you can even begin to think about what you're thinking about, then that's going to be really hard. 4th, conceptually, you want to understand that this religion is rooted in what we call mujahada. It's struggle. And the ability to get to certain places, some of that's going to come with difficulty. The ease that the Prophet speaks about when we're making decisions are eases of externals, things that are outward. But the inward is going to always be a place where there's going to be, at times, a lot of struggle and agitation. And that's where you sit and you breathe and take time to rest. And everything doesn't have to be decided right away and immediately. And I needed to go only right now, 100 miles per hour, always. You just sit down. And then you think, all of you right now, where do you go for your own solitude? Where do you go for stillness? Where do you go for reflection? Where do you go to just sit? I'd like for you all to start bringing notebooks to this so that you can take time and we can have some prompts to just reflect and kind of discuss inwardly with yourselves. When I ask you questions, you can start to answer it. Because I'm not trying to sit here and make this like entertainment. You know, I go to enough places and travel here and there. And to me, it's got to be more substantive. And you want to pick up these tools, right? The word for reflection in Arabic is fikr, fa, kaf, ra. And the word for notebook in Arabic is mufakkir, right? It's the place that you reflect into. Just putting your thoughts down so that you can kind of engage them. So when we ask questions as a prompt, what does love mean to you? What does love look like? What are signs of healthy love, unhealthy love? Do you believe that you are worthy of love? Do you believe that you do not deserve love? Some of those are going to be harder questions. But as you start to piece yourself through it, it's going to get you to a different place. And it reminded me of the last thing that I wanted to say. I was in Arizona last week. I went to a ceremony hosted by a family whose relative was killed. It was the first casualty post September 11th in 2001 of a hate crime. A Sikh man by the name of Balbir Singh Sodhi. And he was at a gas station planting flowers that he had purchased earlier after he had emptied his entire wallet into a box that was collecting funds for 9/11 family members. It's 4 days after September 11th. There was a white mechanic who was quoted as saying earlier that day, he's going to go look for towel heads to kill. And he came upon this man, Balbir Singh, and he shot him at his gas station and killed him. This man's family for the last 20 years has been hosting a memorial at this gas station in Arizona. And on his 20th anniversary, they did, another memorial and invited some people from different places to come and participate and speak. His brother is a man by the name of Rana. And Rana, went through all kinds of things. And then I saw generations of his family, 7 grandkids who were 18 and younger. They never even met him, but they have an awareness of what happened to their grandfather. And in the context of love, this man, Rana, he went to the person who murdered his brother and played a role in getting him off of death row so that he wouldn't get killed for murdering his brother. And part of that came from him forgiving the man for what he did. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, what are you made of? That you have the ability to do that. But he has that in terms of human capacity. And this is Quran, straight up. لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. We have created man in the most beautiful of forms. ثُمَّ رَدَدْنَاهُ أَسْفَلَ سَافِلِينَ. And then we let him fall to the lowest of the low, which means paradoxically within each of us is the ability to be an agent of real beauty and an agent of real ugliness. And you saw it there. Here is this man who was so motivated by his hate that he was just killing for no reason. He thought that guy was Muslim. You can understand that all brown people don't have the same religion. And then they chose to respond to that with something that is better. It's meant to be aspirational. It's not meant to be paralyzing. You don't want to have a state that says that who I am today is something that through self-deprecation would disallow for me to reach where I can be tomorrow. But when I can hear things, I then start to ask the questions of how. And that's where it's important. And I turned to some of these people and I said to them, like, how did you do this? How? How did you do that? And I asked them the same way you asked me, because I don't want to have bitterness in my heart. I don't want to have that toxicity and resentment. So I want to know how you were able to do what you did, because I want to be able to do that too. In our religion, that's what it teaches us. It says that here's processes and steps, and part of it is just the journey of the struggle, even if you don't get there. The man who kills 99 men, does anybody know this hadith? He kills 99 men, And he asked somebody, can I be forgiven? Told no, you can't. He kills that guy too. Then he asks another person and he says, yes, but you have to get to this other town. And on his way to the town, he dies. And the angels of the fire and the angels of paradise come and they fight. One saying he didn't make it to the town, so he's going to Jahannam. And the other saying that he was on his way, he should go to Jannah. They ask Allah, and Allah says that if he's closer to the second town, then take him to paradise. But if he's closer to the first, where he committed the atrocities, then take him to Jahannam. And they measure and they find he's closer to the second. And in some narrations, it says his body was actually closer to the first, but Allah in his mercy makes it seem as if he's closer to the second town. He didn't get to where he needed to go. That's not the point always, to reach the goal, to be there and say, I achieved. But some of it's just about trying to take the steps to make it happen. So even if you keep falling, you get up and you just do what you can do. You see what I'm saying? But it's about movement, right? Sharia is a path to water. Sirah is a movement. The tariqah is movement. Suluk, it's movement. You're not standing still. The hadith says the state of the believer is such that it changes 40 times a day. And the one who has no belief, they're the same for 40 years in a row. And that's what these curriculums do, right? People come to see me all the time. I have 10 years of work experience, 20 years of work experience. It's like, no, man, you just live the same year over and over again, 10 times, 20 times. So you gotta be willing to be open to it. And that's where it goes back to, you gotta love yourself and be forgiving of yourself and be patient with yourself. And then you turn to people where some of us, we don't have like spaces that we go to in our locales. Some of us, our families are not supportive. Our parents don't treat us the way that parents should treat us. Some of us go through all kinds of difficulty. And so you see somebody bigger than just one element of their identity, and you look for reasons to be that kind of support for them. Does that make sense? Okay. In general, we're not going to go this late. I'm sorry that we did. And I know I talk a lot, and I'm trying to work on that. That's something that I have as a goal that I'm working towards. I clearly did not do it the way that I was hoping to today.
If you would like to listen to more, please donate to www.icnyu.org/donate. For more of our virtual programs, go to www.icnyu.org/classes. If you have any questions, email us at info@icnyu.org.